So we have this equation of the trajectory of the ball, I forgot the name of the ball, but that's the trajectory. H is equal to negative 16 t squared plus 32 t and negative 4. And what we're asked to find is H max and also the time in the air. So first of all, we want to have an idea of what the function is looking like, but we can see that later. But since it's a ball in the air, being thrown in the air, we know it's going to do something like this. So it's an inverted parabolic. And then this here will be the max point of the parabolic. And somewhere along the line here, where the parabolic meets the x-axis, something critical is going to happen. Why? Because we assume that the x-axis is the plane from which we're throwing the ball. And since we're on Earth, so this is Earth. So at this point here, when our ball meets the Earth, that's when we throw the ball at first. But at this point here, it's where the ball meets the Earth again. And this is so special because we can see from the picture that at those 2 points, x is equal to 0. And okay, so let's move on. Now, I want to correct some of the things that I said because that day, I think towards the end, we were in a rush since you were tired and you just came from school, which was understanding. So to find the maximum height, which you do, since you clearly see that this is a parabola, or it looks like a parabola, at least the trajectory looks like a parabola, we're going to use the vertex form of a parabola. And why the vertex form? Simply because the vertex form help us find what we need to find. So, if I'm not mistaken, so it's x minus h plus k. That will help us find the maximum. And we know that in this form here, this point here is, let me put it in red. This point here is h and k. And what we're really interested in is k, because k is the y coordinate, so k is the height. H is just along the x axis, but k is the y coordinate. So now, we're going to rearrange the parabola. We're going to rearrange the equation that you're given so that it looks like a vertex. So you have h, and I'm going to add 4 on both sides. And the reason I'm doing that, it's to complete the square. Because I think there's a square here. Yep. Looks right now. And the reason I'm trying to complete the square is so I can have this form over here. Okay. So now I have h plus 4 is equal to negative 16 t squared plus 32t. Okay, so this goes to 0. And I'm left with that. So now, how do I complete the square? Well, you can think of it two ways. We know normally that the trinomial square form is a squared plus or minus 2ab plus or minus plus b squared. So this is now we have a negative in front of the a. So what we can do, we can pull that negative out this way. So I put the negative outside, which means that the 32 is going to become negative. And the reason is, if you put the negative back inside, you're going to have negative 16t squared again and negative 32. Once that's done, let's try to complete the square now. So negative 16t squared. Okay, actually, to make it easier upon ourselves, we can factor the 16 because that's common into both. And that also helps us because we need an a in front of the x minus h. So this is going to be our a. Okay. Now, let's try to complete the square. So, if we have t squared minus 2t, then the square is t minus 1 squared. And the reason I'm saying that is the a in front of the t, I mean a squared is t squared. So a is t. Just as we were doing. Let me do it step by step. Okay, so a squared is t squared. And then we have negative 2t. So since a squared is t squared, then a is t. And if a is t, then b has to be negative 1 or 1, depending on how you look at it. Therefore, this should be 1 or 1 square. So if this is 1 square, then we need a plus 1 here. And since we added something that we were not given, we can only subtract it after adding it. So in this way, we added a fancy 0. So plus 1 minus 1. I hope it makes sense. Okay. So now that I've done that, now you need to be careful the way you expand, because the square that we really need, let me change here. So this is the square that we really need. T squared minus 2t plus 1. This negative 1 is just to cancel this one because it doesn't really, this one was not given to us in the beginning. Therefore, let me do this so you can see it. So it's t minus 1 squared minus 1. So if I distribute, it's going to be negative 16t minus 1 squared plus 16. Okay. And if we get back to where we're our initial equation. So if you get back to that here, we're gonna have h. We subtract 4 on both sides. So okay, so let me erase this. I just don't want to burn any steps so you don't get confused. So I'm going to take -4 here. Okay. So at the end of the day, this is what our equation looks like. Okay. And that is the vertex form. So what we were interested in was really H and K, but mostly K. So H and K are just 1 and 12. And 12 is the height because that's the y coordinate. So if I go back here, you see that this K here is where it's how high the ball is ever gonna reach before it comes back down. Okay. So now that we've done that, the second step is just to find these critical points here. So as I've told you, as I was trying to explain you, these points here are also the roots of the equation. And what's neat with the root of the equation, okay, this is wrong. What's neat with the root of an equation is that at this point, as you can see, the y-axis, at this point, the y is equal to 0. At that point, the y is equal to 0 as well. So you only left with the x coordinate. And this is going to really reflect in your equation. So now, we're going to complete the square. But this time we're completing the square to find the root of the equation. So when y is equal to 0, that's when the parabola or the motion or the movement meets the x-axis. And that's what we're interested in, because when the ball leaves the earth and gets back to earth, if we can know this x coordinate, then we know how long the ball was in the air, basically. Okay, so it shouldn't take us long to do this one. Let's try doing it. Okay. Maybe I'm just gonna create. Sorry, I'm still getting used to it. Okay. (32t minus 4). Okay. So we know that this has to be 0 for us to find the time, and I explained it in the last page why it has to be 0. because at this critical point here, something happens. That's when the ball leaves the earth and gets back to the earth. And at these 2 points, the y coordinate is 0. So there's no height, because that's when it left the earth and then it's going back to the earth. Okay. So now, let's complete the square. So it's really the same thing. We know that the form of the square should be like this. And here we have a minus in front of the a square. So what we want to do, we want to multiply, or we want to maybe add, so flip the equation. We're going to add 16t squared here and then add it over there. We're going to subtract 32 squared here and then subtract it over there. And we're going to add plus 4. So that it looks the way we want it to look. Now, same thing, complete the square. The way we need to complete the square, so if this is a square, and that's negative 32t, then we know that a is 4t and b should be, so since a is 4t, b should be 4, and you can calculate that by yourself. So b squared should be 16. So since I'm adding 16 to complete this square, I have to subtract 16. But now I'm putting back the 4 that was here. Okay. Is equal to 0. Now, this here becomes 4t minus 4 squared minus 16, so that was the square, the perfect squared. So minus 16 plus 4 is minus 12 is equal to 0. Therefore, we have 4t minus 4 squared is equal to 12. And we have 4t minus 4. So if we square root this and square root that, this is what we get. Therefore, 4t is square root of 12 plus 4, but t, well, plus or minus here. And t is only plus or minus square root of 12 plus 4 over 4. Now, plug that into your calculator because that's the easiest way to do it. And what's going to happen is you're going to have 2 times. When you use the negative 12, you're going to have negative square root of 12, you're going to have 1 time. And you'll see that that time, let me use another color. Not such a good idea. Okay. You will see that that time is 0 point something, which is good because 0 point, that time 0 simply means that that's the time at which the ball leaves the earth. And the second answer, using the positive square root of 12 this time, should give you t is equal to 1.86. And this, if you look, is the second time, and the second time is the time at which the ball gets back to the earth. So if it's the time at which the ball gets back to the earth, it just means that this ball spends about 2 seconds in the air. And again, I'll go back to this picture. So the first time it's when it leaves, 0 seconds. The second time is when it reaches the earth at 1.86 seconds. I hope that helps. If you have any question, feel free to ask me.